If any of you wonder why I wear a hat half the time, it's because but anyway, welcome to my full comparison between the new, more affordable iPad Air 4 and the current iPad Pro line, including the last gen 2018 models, because let's face it, they're not much different from the newer ones. But of course, before we continue here, I'd appreciate it if you leave a like if you want to. I'm not forcing you, if you like the video, any engagement is helpful. Leave a comment if you have any questions, suggestions, or opinions, and of course, subscribe too if you want. And if you are already subscribed, click the bell icon, as it does help the channel out a lot. So design-wise, these tablets are very similar in their overall aesthetic, look, and feel. Obviously, the iPad Air 4 takes after the iPad Pro line, especially the previous gen 2018 model. The resemblance is just very strong here, especially with the camera modules, which are identical, by the way, but I'll go over that later in this video. We have the same placement of the Apple logo, the iPad branding, the smart connector. We also have second gen Apple Pencil support, so now the Apple Pencil will stick to your iPad without charging, as I said, like an awkward unicorn. And yeah, I mean, overall, the look and feel and just weight of these devices are similar. Apple wanted to bring the iPad Pro look and feel to the mid-tier iPad, which is great, so many people are excited about that. There are a few minor differences though. For example, there is no antenna line with the iPad Air, whereas we have one with the 2018 iPad Pro and the 2020 iPad Pro. Also, there are different colors available. iPad Pro is currently available in silver and space gray, although previously it was available in gold. There has not been a gold version of this tablet yet with this design. And then with the iPad Air 4, you get more fun colors opposed to the iPad Pro. So on top of the silver and space gray, which are more typical, you also have sky blue, green, and rose gold, which are all gorgeous, I think. Another design difference I want to highlight is with the display bezels. The bezels with the iPad Air 4 are slightly thicker, so think of like the iPhone XR to the XS. It's just a little bit chunkier, a little bit less pleasing to look at, but it doesn't really make a difference at the end of the day. And as I use this tablet by itself, I notice that difference less and less. However, I think Apple does this to differentiate these two tablets just a bit, and also the display with the iPad Air 4 is slightly smaller, so it makes sense. But of course, I'll go over that in the designated display category of this video. Another difference I want to highlight has to do with biometrics and security. As we know, the iPad Pro features Face ID, which is very convenient and accurate. However, with the iPad Air 4, I think Apple decided to omit this because it is a Pro feature, and also I think it's a bit more expensive to implement. So they decided to put a Touch ID sensor in the power button, and it works beautifully. I've never had an issue with it, and I think it's equally convenient, if not more convenient than Face ID, especially now that we're all wearing masks. So if you're out in public and you can't pull your mask down, then this is going to be convenient, and of course it's just as quick and easy to use. The speaker setups within these devices are also a bit different here. While the iPad Air 4 features a similar design, like grill-wise, to the iPad Pro, it doesn't pack 4 individual drivers, only one on the top and one on the bottom, which makes for a great stereo experience, I will tell you, opposed to the iPad Air 3 and previous models, which just had down-firing speakers. But yeah, I mean, I think that the setup is inferior. I will let you decide how much worse or how much better the iPad Pro is with this, test I'm about to perform here, playing some non-copyrighted music. So you let me know how much better the iPad Pro is and how much worse the iPad Air is, if at all. I mean, I think the speakers within the iPad Air 4 are great, but the Pro definitely has a bit of an edge here, and I'll just show you why. Okay, so even with that, I will say, I'll give the iPad Air 4 credit. It has a great sound setup, maybe even improved in some ways over the iPad Pro, but having the extra 2 drivers, I think it just makes the overall sound, a bit more intense, more loud, possibly more clear, like more clarity, if that makes any sense. But yeah, I mean, I'd say both are pretty close here. But yeah, the iPad Pro at the end of the day is gonna have a better sound experience, especially with the iPad Pro 12.9 inch, which I found to have an even better experience than that of the iPad Pro 11 inch, because the drivers have more room to reverberate and just vibrate and give you, your sound. I'm not an audiophile, so I'm just gonna stop talking now. Next up, let's talk about displays here. So iPad Air 4 comes in one standard size, which is 10.9 inches diagonally, whereas the iPad Pro comes in 2 sizes, an 11-inch model, which has a slightly bigger display, as you can tell, 0.1 inches, which makes the bezels a little bit slimmer. Again, that's a very negligible thing. I wouldn't worry about that. And of course, we have the gargantuan 12.9 inch, basically 13-inch iPad, which I daily drive. This is my personal iPad Pro that I love, and it's much bigger, and I do definitely enjoy it for, screen real estate reasons, but I have a whole video going over this form factor compared to this form factor, which is basically this form factor, so I'll link that down below so I won't have to get into that in this video. But beyond the display size differences, there are other similarities and differences to be found in the panels within these tablets. So yeah, while the iPad Air 4 has a fantastic 10.9-inch liquid retina display, or whatever Apple calls it, with great colors and brightness and sharpness, etc., it is inferior compared to that of the iPad Pro and the iPad Pro 12.9-inch that I just showed you here for a couple of reasons. But in regard to the similarities, both of these displays have effectively the same resolution. I mean, a little bit less because this is a smaller display, but the PPI is the same between the two, 264, 265-ish. So one panel is not sharper than the other, and also these displays feature P3 color and True Tone, which are nice touches. However, the iPad Pro panel gets 100 nits brighter max, so 600 nits max brightness here compared to 500 nits max brightness with the iPad Air 4. And also the big one is the difference in display refresh rate. So with iPad Air 4, we get a nice 60 hertz panel. However, with the iPad Pro, we get a really buttery, crispy 120 hertz panel. Apple calls that Pro Motion. And this feature is something that is loved among what Dave2D calls the sweaty tech nerds. I am definitely one of them, and I noticed the difference between these two here. You can probably see it on camera as well. You just can see that the iPad Pro is just a little bit smoother with scrolling and stuff like that. I think it makes a difference in regard to, you know, drawing and note-taking a little bit. It isn't the end of the world, and a lot of people don't notice this, so I highly recommend you go into the store and see if you care about this feature. But if you do, you'll probably go with this tablet anyway, or wish you could. But yeah, that's just a difference that I have to highlight here. That's one of the features that is missing within the iPad Air 4 and also missing within the iPhone 12 and 12 Pro. A lot of people were upset about that, but once again, it's not the biggest feature, it's not a make or break feature. However, it's one that is important to me. And I say this because I am an avid note taker with the Apple Pencil, and while both these tablets have excellent low latency when it comes to actual, you know, drawing and sketching and whatever, having, you know, the refresh rate being double with the iPad Pro just makes things seem a little bit more lifelike, a little bit more realistic, which I do enjoy. But again, it's not the end of the world, you know. You might be able to notice a difference, but if you don't care enough, I would totally go with the iPad Air. It definitely offers a comparable, if not identical, experience in most ways. Also, I'll quickly mention here, Paperlike is a channel sponsor, and I use their screen protectors for all my iPads that I use, you know, frequently. I have one on my daily driver, 12.9-inch, which I put on the floor here. I can bring it back. I mean, like, I use this every single day to take notes in my college classes, whether I understand them or not. But that's not the point. I love these screen protectors because they make the experience, you know, comparable to that of writing on actual paper. I mean, hence the name Paperlike. So I really encourage you to check out my link in the video description. It is an affiliate link, so if you end up buying one, you do help the channel as well. So yeah, I highly recommend that, and you know, consider buying one if you are somebody who is going to get into, you know, digital note taking, whether you buy an 8th gen iPad or an iPad Air 4 or even an iPad Pro. Next up, let's quickly touch on battery life with these devices. So I will say, generally speaking, newer iPads, you know, the iPads I've experienced in the past like year or two have been fantastic at getting me through the day, you know, with standby time. So they all perform within the ballpark of each other. However, I think the iPad Air 4, from my sort of eyeballing, you know, non-scientific testing or anything, performs a bit better. And it makes sense because the A14 is, you know, of course, smaller, 5 nanometer, it's, you know, more efficient. And not only that, it's accompanied with a 60 hertz display, which is, you know, less power consuming. So the iPad Pro is a bit more taxing in regard to its older, less efficient processor and higher refresh rate display. So you might squeeze out a couple minutes out of this device, if not an hour maybe. I would recommend looking up some specific statistics. I have not. I'm just kind of telling you my own, you know, sort of anecdotal, but still relevant, you know, observation between these two devices. But anyway, yeah, I think the iPad Air 4 has slightly better battery life. However, both are gonna get you through the day, no problem. But you're gonna have to plug in if you are doing anything intensive, which we'll talk about in the performance aspect of this video. But next up, let's talk about camera, or cameras to be more accurate here. And as you can see, between the iPad Air 4 and the 2018 iPad Pro, the camera modules look to be the same, and that's because they are. Apple took the camera setup within the 2018 iPad Pro minus the flash, which is kind of a nice thing if you're taking pictures or scanning documents in the dark. But you know, they took the same capabilities and module or sensor and slapped it into here, so you get great 12 megapixel photos and 4K 60 video. And of course, the same can be said about the 2020 iPad Pro, which has the addition of, you know, an ultra wide lens and sensor and also a LiDAR scanner. So, you know, you get a more advanced camera with the iPad Pro, although in my comparison between these two tablets and in my full review, I don't think I make quite, full use of that tech there, although it is nice to have, and I know people who definitely use the LiDAR detector for their own profession within apps that involve AR. So if you need that, that might be worth it. But yeah, I mean, across the board, you're getting really great tablet photo and video. That is something I'm not super keen on or I don't need. But yeah, I would say the iPad Air 4 has a really decent camera, more than anything I would use, more than anything I think most consumers would use. But if you are into tablet photography or videography, this is gonna perform great, just like the module did in the iPad Pro 2018. And also really quick here, the front-facing cameras are very similar, if not identical. They have a sensor size or resolution of 7 megapixels. However, the iPad Air 4 lacks the Face ID tech, so you don't get front-facing portrait mode, which I never use with my iPad anyway, but if you want to, you can. You also lack Animoji because you don't have the tech in there too. But yeah, once again, pretty much the same front-facing camera quality for FaceTime calls and also selfies if you do that. And finally, let's touch on performance between these two devices here. And I actually did a whole in-depth performance test between the A14 and the A12Z and effectively the A12X because they're the same yesterday. So I highly encourage you to watch that video if you want to see, how these devices perform synthetically and in real-world performance-oriented situations. That is so wordy. I don't know why I said that like that, but anyway, in this video, I want to kind of draw on some of those conclusions that I made to give you more of a brief overview as to what you can expect between these two devices. So yeah, essentially within the iPad Air, we have the newest gen A14 processor, which is based off of a brand new 5nm architecture, meaning that each individual core of the 6 cores in this processor are more powerful. As you can see, the single core scores with the iPad Pro are around 1100, whereas with the iPad Air, it's around 1600. So there's a jump there. However, the A12Z within the iPad Pro and effectively the A12X, although the processor architecture is older and each individual core is less powerful, there are more of them. This is an 8-core processor, which has a better GPU, by the way, and 2 more gigs of RAM. So with that said, you get a higher multi-core score here, substantially so. So where the iPad Pro lacks in single-core scores, it makes up for in multi-core scores and vice versa with the iPad Air. So what does that mean? Well, in everyday tasks, the iPad Air is gonna seem a little bit more snappy, despite the fact that it doesn't have 120 hertz, although that does make animation seem nicer on the iPad Pro, it doesn't actually translate into better performance. So apps will definitely open a bit more quickly with the iPad Air, as I demoed in my in-depth performance test yesterday, and other, daily tasks might seem a little bit more snappy. As I said, I noticed the same thing with my iPhone 12 and 12 Pro compared to that of my iPhone 11 Pro and the iPhone XS Max that I had before that. However, when it comes to heavier stuff like gaming and video editing, the iPad Pro is going to pull ahead, because once again, even though it has an inferior processor architecture or an outdated one, it has 2 additional cores and a beefier GPU. It's just a beefier processor. The X and Z variants of the A, whatever chips are always more powerful, and the A12X and Z are just pushing and chugging along just fine, even though the architecture is now 2 years old. So with that said, yeah, once again, both are gonna perform very comparably in pretty much every regard. However, if you want a slightly snappier device, you might want to go with the iPad Air, whereas if you want a more pro-oriented device, good for, high-end gaming and, high-end 4K video editing and stuff like that, the Pro is still the way to go. But even with everything said, even though the iPad Pro is gonna continue to be my daily driver, the iPad Air 4 is just a fantastic value. And a lot of people are saying this, and I can agree, it might be the best value iPad ever. They took everything that consumers care about with the iPad Pro and brought it into a more affordable and attainable iPad. And I'm telling you, this is gonna be really popular among college students. If I was doing tech YouTubing for a living, this would be my tablet because it offers a full screen display and the Apple Pencil 2nd Gen and the overall slab tab look. Also, USB Type-C, I almost forgot to mention this. That is a very important feature if you were, concerned about connectivity and you want to connect dongles and stuff. It is a very convenient feature and great for creative professionals or aspiring ones. This is a great tablet for that because even though it's not as fast with video rendering compared to the iPad Pro, you can still do it beautifully with the iPad Air. Hell, you can even do it with the iPad 8th Gen. So I mean, this is a very capable tablet. Do not doubt that, but no, the iPad Pro has a slight edge on it in regard to display and performance. But other than that, I mean, this tablet might be the one to go with. I highly recommend it, and look for some discounts that are coming with this. I know that the cheaper iPads tend to have better discounts than the Pro ones, but also the Pro ones do too. And also something to consider, The iPad Pro 2018 is going to be cheaper than the iPad Pro 2020, obviously. So if the ProMotion is important to you and a higher end 8-core processor is as well, try to find one of these used for a comparable price. And if you can find it in a capacity that you want, then you might want to go with this as well. And that about wraps things up here. I hope this video was helpful. Once again, I'd appreciate it if you leave a like, comment, and of course subscribe for more content like this, and click the bell icon if you do. I plan on covering the iPad Air 4 more in depth, so stay tuned for that during the next coming weeks. And I also am planning some iPhone 12 and 12 Pro content, maybe a review, probably some comparisons and stuff like that. Really excited for the 12 mini, by the way, when that comes out in November, but that's just a random thought for you. Anyway, it is now 1:15. I have to shoot the entire comparison itself that you've already watched and edited and stay up till 6. So other than that, I am Noah, and I will catch you all in the next one.